Being great at your job might be the very thing that's holding you back from being a real leader. Right now, we're seeing the consequences of this everywhere in our society. We may not have a talent crisis, but it appears to me that we have a leadership crisis. We've got people who are exceptional at doing work, but they haven't made this shift to actually leading others in doing work. Most people get really good at what they do. They become the expert, the go-to, the one everyone depends on. But very few can make the transition from doing the work to leading the work. Today, I'm honored to have Ed Tyson on the show, who has built his work around the exact shift I'm talking about. He is the author of From Expert to Executive, where he breaks down what it really takes to move from being the one who delivers, the one who sets the one who sets directions, develops people, and carries real responsibility. Here's the truth. What made you successful as an expert can actually be keeping you stuck as a leader. So today we're going to get into mindset shifts. We're going to talk about this topic, and we're going to really diagnose what the leadership crisis may be. So Ed, welcome to the Self-Leadership Lab. Let's get right into it. Why do you think so many high performers struggle when they step into leadership, even though they were exceptional at what they did prior to that point in their lives?
Well, first, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. Really looking forward to our conversation today. Second, I think it's because if we unravel what that means, a high performer, what was performance frequently or pardon me, previously? And what are you focused on in trying to achieve? So if we strip leadership back, I think the first problem becomes not respecting that the purpose of leadership is a lot different than the purpose of an individual contributor role, whatever your technical expertise might be in that role. And so when I do that, this is where I think you start to uncover the slipperiness, because really the fundamental problem that leadership is there to solve is when we embrace an objective, whether it's been handed to us or we have created in our minds, that is so audacious, so lofty, we cannot achieve it alone. And so right there, that's the conception of leadership as a process of social organization that is meant to solve that problem, meant to create a community of effort that can go achieve that objective, which is so audacious, it cannot be achieved alone. And so if we think about that for a second, this is where a lot of leadership goes sideways, whether you're a high performer or not, is the thing that has inspired you, that is the objective you can't achieve alone. But the purpose of your leadership is the cultivation of a community of effort that is willing enough, capable enough, and sustainable enough to get that job and the subsequent jobs done. And so the work of leading becomes answering that purpose, not the purpose that set you on the journey, that inspired you to go get that community of effort, but it is the creation of the community of effort, right? Mm. And when high performers are used to just seeing the objective, driving towards the objective, and achieving the objective. And so when they hold a new objective, they keep that in their focus instead of the cultivation of this community of effort. And that's where all the calamity ensues. And we mistake the team's work for our own as a leader.
That's an interesting way you define it. And I mean, again, there's many definitions of leadership out there, but I kind of like it. But why, out of curiosity, why did you use the word audacious? What about leadership that's not an audacious goal? Is there a separation to you in that, or that's just an interesting word? Because I know we throw audacious goals around as coaches a lot, but I just wondered why you use that word.
Sure. Well, first, I love a good word that's got some texture to it. But because precisely we're saying it's big enough, it's a difficult enough goal that I can't just do it myself. I can't just will it across the line. It requires others. And so that is the audaciousness of the human spirit. And so we have created essentially, and we leverage this social science of leadership, this process of social organization, uh, differently even than other herd and pack animals. It's unique to us in the way we use this tool to do things that are bigger than ourselves, bigger than our own effort. So at its core, I think it is audacious. It's audacious to think I could embrace something bigger than just me and kind of convince a community of effort, structure, design that community of effort, engage it, and then continuously improve it through time in order to make it enough to achieve the goal. And that's what we're doing when we lead.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like the way you describe it, and I like the parameters that you've set for this conversation. So you mentioned that part of your definition is something you cannot achieve on your own. Why do you think leaders struggle in bringing other people to their vision? Like, do you have a core kind of framework or kind of thinking theory around this?
Well, I start with the idea. First of all, let me just acknowledge the assumption that you're making there is that they do struggle with this, right? Earlier, I mentioned three things, and these are the three things I think every leader has to be obsessed with. The team has to be willing, because if they are not willing, then it is not leadership. Volition matters. Like, the choice of the individuals matters in leadership, or else you're using some other social pressure or force to make somebody do something, right? We call that not leadership, but dictatorship, right? And we have even nastier words for compelling other people to do things against their will. So they have to be willing. They have to be capable, because just willingness is not enough. Being agreeable and is maybe the minimum bar, and then all the way up to being motivated. You can't just run them right off a cliff or into the side of a cliff. They need to be capable. And then lastly, they won't stay willing and capable if it's not sustainable. And of course, sustainability in that conversation means everything from the fact that, hey, humans are temporary. So if you are leading a human system, you need to stare in the mirror and recognize that includes replacing yourself, like the sustainability. It doesn't just mean, are we working too hard to the goal? It's all of us will at some point in this human system, if it has any kind of longevity, need to replace one another in the system, whether that's other people on the team or yourself as the leader. And so if you don't have that mindset, then you're likely doing some of the wrong things when you've designed, engaged, or set about improving this system, if you've thought the players will never change. And that's, can be a fundamental problem.
Yeah, based on those three components that you laid out, where can a leader, or how do you recommend a leader assess to make sure that they do have, one, the right people in the right seat, to quote the famous book, but then also, like, is the leader themselves capable of taking this team to where they need it to go or want it to go?
Right. Well, they must not be, or they wouldn't need leadership. I'll start there. And because leadership is something for you that you can't do alone. So you must be missing elements. So and the leader, anytime they put on themselves the burden of being right or knowing what to do, being the highest and best at a particular skill that maybe the team or function represents, they are falling down a trap. They're falling down a trap where they position their strength as a leader to being right, to knowing where to go, which means any good ideas are inherently a challenge to their leadership. So you're creating a problem right away. But I will back up and say that was not necessarily the spirit of your question. And I went so deep on my answer to the last one that I really didn't get to it, and they kind of converge. Which is, how does a leader design that right community of effort? How do they look at the problem and realize I need to be thoughtful about this community of effort and understand my needs. But it's more than just that. I need the community of effort itself to understand this as well. This can't just be my work. Some portion of the team, if not the whole team, or you've probably noticed about 1,000 times I've used this term community of effort, because I believe so often as leaders, we focus on the core team that we've either been given or we've hired into a particular role, that we miss the fact that really our success hinges on a broader community of effort. That either includes like adjacent functions in a large organization, or our key customer community, or vendors and partners, et cetera. So we often, by focusing only on our team, set our team up for failure. So as the leader, we need to help ourselves and our team zoom out and establish our scope. And this gets to many of the questions that you're just asking, like, what am I leading? This answers precisely the question of like, what separates Mark and Susan over here from all the other people I can see if I look out into either the hallways of a large organization or a crowd of people walking in public. Like, what defines what I'm leading? And I say that's your scope. And my framework breaks that down into the strategies that you're deploying to realize the cultural and business objectives, realize your purpose inside the ecosystem. So SCOPE, which to develop that scope, I suggest you kind of go backwards, culminating in those winning strategies. So looking at my ecosystem, what are the dynamics? What are the opportunities? What are the challenges? What are the needs of the different stakeholders? And what are we here? What is this group here to deliver to that ecosystem? And that's your purpose. So now you get the E and the P. And then you continue to take that journey and say, well, what objectives will mark our path towards achieving that purpose? Both the long-term ones, almost in terms of backing way out to the vision here, what's the highest impact we're trying to have on this broader community of effort and this broader ecosystem, all the way to, but like next month, what do we need to have achieved, right? Like getting down to those objectives, both the short and the very long term. And then saying, okay, what are the cultural considerations and maybe even objectives we need to set also that have to be reached because of the way we want to be or the way we must be in order to insert well with a broader organization with a broader scope that we're just a piece of. And then it's time to talk strategies. Now it's time to say, how do we deploy resources? What are our themes for deploying our resources and, our people, our money, our attention, our time, and the patterns of our tactics that are going to result in victory. And that's broadest level is your scope. Using somebody else's language, it's how do I do an environmental assessment, pair that with mission, vision, values, and develop my strategies, right? So scope is a concept that kind of includes all of those things. And it's just a perfect acronym because it really does say, what are the borders of my team? What separates us from the rest of this broader ecosystem, those of us who are part of this community of effort. And once I've done that, now I can begin to translate that to the actual work, or the work methods and tools, the organizational structure, the rewards and recognition systems, and determine the knowledge and capabilities I need on the team. And so if you're following really closely there, you recognize that, hey, as a former Marine and healthcare executive, I love me some acronyms. And so that was my work acronym. So I say you've got to scope the work to structure the team that you need. And so work, again, is that work methods and tools, organizational structure, rewards and recognition, and knowledge and capabilities. And so by doing all of that, you've answered the why, the what, and the how at the very highest level. And that is a big hunk of the work of leading. It is, what I refer to as the structure domain and the most important start. Even if you say you're a new leader and you don't get to decide your organizational structure, or even your operating model. You sure as heck still better be able to say what your scope is, even if no one's empowering you to devise your objectives and the cultural considerations and the strategies. Even if all of those have been given to you, you still need to make sure you deeply understand all that. And so does your team and the broader community of effort that you need to cooperate with you to get the work done.
Yeah, that's a fascinating breakdown, and I'm kind of surprised the Marine would have an acronym that long. Just kidding. I thank you for your service and for serving this great nation. But in all seriousness, though, do you think that a lot of times, like people with the idea do it opposite of what you said? They don't set that scope first. They set the end objective first and then try to jam the scope in. Is that something? I know you consult with a lot of businesses and you've been doing this for a while. Is that just my interpretation, or do you see similarities?
No, I absolutely run into that all the time, where I have a client that wants to basically what they want to focus on and they it's like the tip of an iceberg, right? They want to focus on the thing that we see the most and we inherently feel there might be something wrong with, which is my structure. I think I need to change my structure up. I think that we need to make, and so to do that, what they literally want to do is run to the whiteboard and begin drawing boxes and lines. And what you end up with there is an org structure you cannot evaluate whether or not it's the right structure. Because you lack the context, which basically is the scope, right? That's why is this group been formed? What is its purpose? And at the highest level, how will it achieve that? So a lot of them run there. But even worse than that, and I think this was also what you were inferring, is a lot of times I find executive teams who are locked in conflict around the strategy. And they're literally just doing what I call rolling proposition. They're just, I think we should do this. I think we should do this. Now, each of those strategies is actually hiding what it's about. Underneath all of that is, okay, I think this is the right strategy because I think this should be our culture. I think we should be driving toward these objectives and realizing this purpose because of these needs in our ecosystem. And oftentimes the argument is really, are we seeing our ecosystem the same way? Are we seeing the same dynamics, opportunities, challenges, interactions, right? Unique space for us to succeed. And instead we're having this conversation. No, I think we should do this or make this investment. But what we're really arguing about is that might be the best strategy for what you conceive as the culture we're trying to reinforce, the business objectives we're trying to achieve, the purpose of this organization within our ecosystem. The problem is the strategy I'm arguing with you about that I want to do, trailing back does not have its basis in many of those things, often because it's rooted all the way back at the beginning, which is we are not looking at the world around us in the same way. And as a result, we're trying to operate very differently within our teams and in the marketplace, and it's resulting in calamity.
So how do you avoid like synergy or groupthink? I mean, again, you don't want everyone to exactly view the same thing. You don't want yes men and women on your team. I mean, you want differing opinion. You want that tension. But where can you like avoid that in the whole process? Is this in the scoping piece? Because the way you see it outside of the scope may differ, but the scope has to be locked in, or kind of explain that to me a little better.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think that gets into the details of like, how do you do? So my whole thing is SOPs, right? I suggest that there is this work out there. Scope and work fall into the structure portion of this work of leading. And you need to develop your SOPs for doing that work, your processes for getting it done, right? And as you encounter common problems with engaging groups and getting to decisions, one of them is everyone does not agree. Everyone has gotten tired of any disagreement or is fearful of the disagreement, right? There's lots of different models. If I would use the Lencioni model, I would say we need to develop enough trust to have conflict. If I would go all the way back to Tuckman's model of forming, storming, norming, and performing, I would say we haven't done enough forming and generated enough commitment to be able to have conflict. Right? There's lots of models for it. But the plain truth is, when humans get together, the odd thing about our normal social mores, the neurotypical human, when it enters a group that it wants to grow trust and feel sense of belonging, the tool we use to generate that is lying to people. I know that sounds wait, what? Just picture going, so I've been married 22 years. So picture going to your what's going to be your in-laws for the very first time and sitting down to dinner. We don't say, geez, these aren't how my mom used to make the potatoes. I don't like these, or this isn't how I personally make the potatoes. And I don't like this meal, or geez, you've decorated this place funny, or whose broken down car is that in the drive? We do not do these things because they disturb social order. They do not ingratiate us into people who are being kind and hosting us. So we tell all these lies. We do the same thing in business teams, which is, I think the leader is really benevolent and good, even though you've seen them make some questionable decisions, even though you're right. So as you begin to take in this data as a leader, that's where your standard operating procedures for doing this work get better and better and better. And one of the things that I always say is, look, if your team has not been together for a long time, you need a strategy, you need an SOP for doing what you just asked. So that was a long way to say, I think you need to think about it. Now, an example of two, I just put a hat on my head, because one is you can think about, how do you either put a hat on one person's head that says, you are going to be the person who is going to look at this scenario differently. You are going to be the devil's advocate, and you give somebody permission to truly think through the other side of an issue. In fact, that term devil's advocate really comes from the need to put this role in with the, I'm probably going to use the wrong term, but like the canonization of saints. How when you agree that somebody has achieved sainthood, and I think it started in the Catholic Church, that they would have one, I think it was a bishop that would be there, a cardinal, and they would always go to the opposite side. They start from the lens that this person is not a saint, whereas everyone else is trying to prove the sainthood. So that's one thing. Now, the problem with that is it can get quite comical in groups where people don't think through really thoughtfully, and suddenly it just becomes apparent that they're just living the desire of being having a devil's advocate at the table in a way that just doesn't have a biting truth to it that's helping to direct the group. So taking that to another step is having, and I call this kind of like coordinated thinking, not groupthink, which is, let's develop a few options to put on the table. Now let's talk about the strength of those options, all of us. So even if you don't like option one, you're still with us as a team as we talk about the best things about option one. You are also with us as a team as we now criticize option one, look for the risks inherent in either what it will look like to deliver option one, how difficult that will be to communicate, will it be embraced, right? All of those things. We as a team are going to be critical, and we as a team are going to be innovative or creative, go through these cycles together, but we are going to make it okay to even think there's problems with the best option. The best option is not a perfect option. We are going to perfect it together.
Yeah. It brings a lot of objectivity to whatever you're discussing, I think. So some of these concepts are, I mean, I'll be honest with you, I'm a leadership guy. I've read a lot of books, studied it a lot. This whole systems think and, processes and all this kind of thing, like to a guy like me, it doesn't always jive. I mean, I get it. I understand the value of what you're saying, but what would you say to someone who's like me, who's not like a real process driven, I mean, in a written way or kind of a constructed way, I guess.
Yeah.
How would you like, sell this to someone like me who thinks like I do? I agree completely with like, getting this scope, and I like your whole theory, but if it seems like overwhelming, what are some simple steps we can take as leaders to, incorporate this, but maybe more in like, I don't know, layman's terms or blue collar type terms?
Yeah. Well, first let's just break it down. So uh, I'm gonna start lofty, and then I'm gonna get right down to maybe one of the most poignant analogies. So on the lofty side, I'm gonna say that all performance is the result of the process. So if we agree that when we are in leadership training, we are we're not improving our leadership in leadership training, we're improving our potential leadership, because leadership is fundamentally a behavior. So I cannot lead somebody in my brain, at least the technology has not been demoed with me yet, to lead a group of people with just my brain activity. So no matter what we do with self-reflection, experiencing other intellectual models and academics, leadership is an action. So if we just start there, that you need, because of our limitations as humans, you need to both speak and do, and or you're writing, right, but you're communicating in order to bring leadership into the real world and transform it from potential leadership, right? So I think of that as like potential energy. You lift it up, lift an object up off a plane, and you can calculate the energy stored in that object vis-a-vis the pull of gravity on whatever planet you're on, the acceleration that therefore, and now you know what kind of energy will be released when it hits the plane below it. Leadership is the same way. Like, you can really increase your potential leader, but till you release that object, you haven't released the energy that is stored there. Same thing with leading. Now, is it better to do that leading in a chaotic and haphazard fashion? Or is it better to do that leadership in an intentional, sequential, and repetitious way? And what I'm going to say is what we know from sports. Now I'm going to just bring it super, like, if you're the coach of a team, what do you do to make a stronger team and help that team win? You develop, if it's a team sport, you develop plays, you run those plays again and again and again in practice and then in the big game. And the reason we do that is because that repetition for those coordinating the effort builds their personal proficiency in what they need to do. And the individuals running the play, they build their personal proficiency at the role that they're being asked to do. It provides a dynamic and a time for the team to make observations and adjust, provide feedback, etc. They also, through that coordination and that repetition, they build trust. They build trust in the ability to do a no-look pass. They know who is where on the field of play and when. They know what it looks like when, Susan runs that play. What's the body language? Is she going to make it and be there on time? Or is this one of those instances where we know we have to adapt? Now you get to not just simple coordination, but the answer to getting to complex coordination is that simplicity. I'll bring it to a different one. Why do militaries march?
I should know this. Especially being from the military band, I don't know though.
A to point B. There is a psychological impact on the people marching, and there is a psychological impact on the people witnessing the marching. And there is a lot to getting kinetic in a coordinated way that builds trust it builds competence, and it builds confidence. And so this is why we need to develop intentional SOPs for doing the work of leading with our team. Should those be immovable, never change? Heck no. They need to change all the time and be evolving. And eventually, they need to be the team's SOPs, is the truth of it. If we're thinking of this from a group dynamic, we need to eventually move from they were my SOPs as the leader to they're our SOPs for structuring, operating, and perfecting this community of effort. They're ours. So at some point, there is a shift in the power structure where the leader is no longer the one establishing this kind of structure and process, but the team is providing feedback and evolving and making them the team's SOPs.
Yeah, yeah. No, I like that breakdown. And for a simple mind like me, you really helped me out with that. I do understand that, I mean, again, that way you have a standard in which to measure and a standard in which to evolve to. And I especially like going down to the lower level because, the higher level echelons, whatever, C-suite, however you want to call it, don't know how the work is actually getting done. So if they put an SOP on someone, then you need to go to the user. You need to go to the person who's turning the wrenches or writing the code or whatever they're doing that they know. I like that kind of thinking, and I do understand how it does develop trust because once you run a play, it's sometimes I think we forget that running a sports team analogy or a military exercise or something like that, the drilling. I guess a lot of times in business, we don't really do that. Do you propose that businesses or organizations, run drills, run scenarios, while they're preparing to launch a product or, get work done?
I do. I think some of it is different in that I don't suggest we're suddenly spending significant amounts of time creating simulations and running waste of time simulations. I do think that we should improve and increase the thinking through of how we are going to do things. Like, how do we incorporate a change into what we do? Is it different every time, the way that change gets communicated? Who communicates it? How long is it from the communication to action? Like, all those things trip us up. If we want to be truly agile, we should be used to looking. It's just like when in the military, when you're learning to march, there is a limited, who is going to be issuing that command. And there's a limited set of commands that you're expecting, right? You're expecting, oh, or right, face. And so as soon as you're hearing, the reason that cadence comes out the way I just did it is left. Okay, which one's my left? Face. We all go in unison, right? It is a structured cadence to how everyone issues those commands that gives you the amount of time to create the presence of mind. I'm listening where I'm supposed to be listening. I now know which way I'm turning, and now we are turning. Of course, that's super overly simplistic of what we encounter both in the battlefield and in the business that you might be in. And is a powerful analogy for understanding who is going to tell us that certain things are changing. And don't we get both upset and confused when suddenly the wrong people are doing it at the wrong time or in the wrong way? So we can truly become way more agile if we develop good change processes that we agree this is the kind of change. This is the cadence of our change. And this is, by the way, this is what it looks like to embrace a rapid cycle change that we can't be so thoughtful about, that has to be an audible. Who calls the audibles? That's just as important as how do we do the thoughtful change, right? Is, okay, hey, we all just, an email just changed the day, changed the month, or changed the year. How do we get that message out and get activity coordinated and happening in the right direction? And if you have not developed the SOPs for that, you're going to screw it up.
Yeah. No, you're definitely converting me to more of this thinking because I've never thought about it in the way that you do, but using the military examples and those sort of things. And like you said, all I've seen confusion so many times within organizations because the message comes from a different source or a different person, even a different format. You start because like you said, if something's important enough, you got to be able to boom, like you said, that the way you did it better than I did, you go in commands, but you know it's coming and you know how to react. Whereas, like, if you're the one giving cadence and then all of a sudden I, from the middle of the formation, start saying things, it just causes confusion. And I think confusion is what erodes trust, which is kind of a good segue to because when I first met you, you gave me or led me to a study talking about how CEOs didn't like trust or have faith in their leaders, and then even leaders underneath the CEO didn't have respect for each other. Talk about that a little bit more in this construct of kind of the way you see organizations that aren't running efficiently and using SOPs.
Sure, yeah. Like before the pandemic, there was a massive study done that's done every couple of years by the conference board and a bunch of other participants. And what it showed basically was that about 16% of global CEOs and CHROs think they have the leaders they need to execute the strategy. Now, this was not a comment on did they have hundreds of unfilled roles. This was, to your point, the trust they had that the leaders they do have were leading. And this study fit really nicely into what I was observing. And if I put it into my words, it's just not enough leaders are leading. And I just really, really wanted to kind of meditate on that a bit and understand, what did that mean? What does it mean to say leaders aren't leading? And because that's not saying they're not leading well, right? And so if you want to try and fix that problem, how do you get leaders in the process of leading? And you think about, well, I guess you need to define it, and then you need to engage in it, and then improve it, then worry about improvement. And then I thought, well, how does that match up with what we do out there for leadership training and development? What do I do when I'm coaching? And that's when I really started having some, building blocks in my brain start to crumble and crack. And I just started feeling very uncomfortable as I thought, well, geez, we are hyper focused in the leadership development space on the skills and competencies that help leaders lead well. But if we're listening to the CHROs and the CEOs, again, globally, they're saying, they're just not leading. So what are they doing, right? And this gets back to the very first question you asked about this challenge of high performers and moving into leadership, is they have not well identified the work of leading, and then they're not doing it. And so what that caused me to do was, first of all, do the reflection that I started with this idea that there's something about the purpose of leading that we get confused about easily and we're not super clear about. And so I really spent time trying to get that clear in my mind so that I could get it clear in my coaching of what is the purpose of leading. The purpose of leading is to cultivate a community of effort. And then if you go from that, what's the purpose? You've got to get to then what's the work? What's the work they should be doing? And I say, okay. And I've kind of flirted with it a few times here, but if you need a community of effort, if that's this problem you're trying to solve, the capacity to get this audacious goal that you can't do alone done, well, you have to structure that community of effort thoughtfully. You have to then engage it as it was structured so that you can continue to perfect it. And so that's where I started coming up with conceiving of these three domains of leading: structure, operate, and perfect. And that's how really the leadership SOPs is not just a methodology that we talked about before of saying, hey, yeah, you should create these standard operating procedures for yourself. So the SOPs and leadership SOPs doesn't just stand for creating those standard operating procedures, but what they should be aimed at, which is the structuring, the operating, and the perfecting of communities of effort. So now you've got the why, or the purpose of leading, the what, which is that work of structuring, operating, and perfecting communities of effort, and the how you do it. And very tippy top of that how is the skills and competencies. And yet that's what we're spending our time teaching, coaching, assessing, etc. It would be like if you were sitting down with a soccer team and you were saying, okay, well, where's my leader on the field? It's you, Jonathan. Great, fantastic. Johnson, let me take you to this class on sportsmanship, and you're going to know everything you need to know about leading this team. And then that class gets over, and we didn't really tell them what they were supposed to do. So we're really not focusing in most, not all, but most of the leadership training on what's this work of leading. So then they come out and they've got these skills and competencies and better self-actualization, better self-awareness, all these things, potential leadership high, but they don't know what to do. And so they go back and they exercise those skills. In the best scenario, they figure out how to take those skills and competencies they just learned and apply them to the team's work, not the work of leading. And that's why you've got this problem, which has only gotten worse since before the pandemic, where CEOs don't think leaders are leading. Leaders don't think their peers and their leaders are leading. And employees, rank and file, individual contributors, they think none of us are doing it right. And as a result, we've got the youngest portions of the workforce passing on the role altogether. I mean, we are truly facing this human scalable systems are imploding. Like, how do we do this? And at precisely the time that, hey, AI wants to replace everything else we're doing. So, we're creating an opportunity to make even leadership one of these things that maybe AI can do better than we can. Maybe it won't be as confused about the work of leading as us.
Yeah, man, those are you're giving me so much to unpack here. I guess probably one of my final questions is then what do we do about it? Like, what do we do about it? I mean, I know you've got a training curriculum, then you're going out and helping people with this, but obviously you can't talk to every organization across the planet. So what do you think are some like takeaways myself, the audience can do to start, I mean, this is the self-leadership lab, so leading ourselves better so we can lead others better, but not in the traditional administrative roles, the kind of touchy-feely, feel-good kind of things. I mean, to truly make a change, go after the scope, the purpose, the vision, those kind of things.
So I would say first, let me just start with, forget about Ed Tyson, but just think you can't even remember my name after this episode, right? But you can remember these concepts that we've talked about, and you can recognize that there might be a difference between the work I'm doing to lead and the work the team has to do to succeed, that those might be two different things. What I would say is, well, what do we know about process improvement? How do we improve any process, right? So I was a process improvement executive. And what I'll say is there's common high-level things that are not rocket science. Decide what you're trying to achieve and write that down of what you think it's going to take to do it, and then try doing it that way and check out your results and make some adjustments based on feedback, based on performance, based on, right? and then work it again, and then work it again, and then work it again, and keep heading towards right. And recognize that even if you can't remember, I covered the 9 dimensions I have under structure, and whether or not you can remember those ever again, what you can remember is the idea that I need to understand why. Why does this community of effort exist? What is it trying to achieve? And how is it trying to achieve that? And how does that translate into the roles that I've got, the macro processes, the tools we're engaging, the kind of incentives we have? You don't have to master my language to get deep into this work and develop some SOPs to do it. And then the rest becomes how do you actually engage in that work, right? Set the pace, the tactical planning, the accountability, and the stakeholder engagement, and develop the my personal development, individual development or coaching, team development or coaching, and enterprise development. And so MITE. So I've got, you've got to scope the work under structure, you've got to set the pace under operate, and you have to develop the might in order to perfect it. And that's kind of how I do it. But the question is, how do you think about it? How do you remember it? I use all these acronyms and mnemonics because my recall sucks. And I couldn't even teach my own model if they weren't there. But how will you do it? How will you dig into this work, and how will you do it? And then how will you remember? What mechanisms will you use to make sure this works? And that's where I've been focusing the last 2 years of my life on a technology startup, trying to develop the Leadership SOPs app, which is exactly what we've called it, which is throwing AI, workforce, workflow automation at this problem of helping leaders define and activate and even share their best SOPs. So we pulled together kind of a space for free if you're in the US right now. For kind of a limited time, you'll find it on your iPhone or on your Android device just by looking up Leadership SOPs, all one word. You can even go to leadershipsops.app and pop it up on your browser. But the idea is we're trying to help leaders get this stuff down, activate it and track their activity and improve it, and then be able to share. So we've got a public library, ability to do all that kind of stuff within this semi-social platform that's really focused on leaders leading.
Wow. That's truly amazing. And I like the way you think about this. And I'm glad that someone other than me is thinking about this, and then I can just absorb it. And also, I mean, I think you have an acronym for everything, which is awesome. I mean, it's cool that you think in that way. But in addition to the app, tell people else where they can get you, because you said they'll forget your name, but let's give them a reason to remember you and reach out to you. And I mean, at least where to get the book, that sort of thing. So fill us in on all that as well.
Well, you can go to leadershipsops.com, find a lot of information about the model and me. You can go to leadershipsops.app. I'll know when you're in there. I'll send you a message. You can also follow, or connect with me on LinkedIn, or grab my book, From Expert to Executive, Mastering the SOPs of Leading, on Amazon.
Awesome. Well, Ed, thank you so much for your time and for breaking this down for a nug like me. You got me thinking about a lot of things. I think about leadership a lot, but I haven't really thought about this systems process as much. And I'll be honest with you, I probably should have told you before you go to the show. I think a lot of it is because I do government consulting as my real job, and the process is it becomes shelfware. In fact, I was on a meeting earlier today, and it was like, yeah, why do we need to do this? We're just gonna put it on the shelf. And I'm like, yeah, and maybe that's the problem right there. Maybe we're writing processes and procedures that we don't follow. We're just doing them to do them. So if someone comes and audits us, we can point to the shelf and say, "Hey, look at this binder," or whatever. So maybe like just my inundation of that, which a lot of times impedes the work I was doing, or at least I saw it was. But you've changed my mindset, which is the whole purpose of this podcast and this. So I thank you for sharing it with us. Any closing? You got a closing thought, and inspiration, something like that, to get us out of here? I want to give you the last word today.
Well, I'm just going to say, for those of us, look, I developed the Leadership SOPs and the mnemonics in the Leadership SOPs because of faults I have, and I think when we aim that kind of rigor, we can aim it at anything that we have gaps. We have gaps on the team. We have gaps with ourselves. And it's a way to both lead not just the team, but yourself, and develop some rigor and some discipline and some swings that start to build muscle memory. And like reps in the gym, you're going to build that personal proficiency. You're going to build the personal proficiency and confidence of your team, trust and collaboration just by doing it the same way again. So you can't remember anything else. You can remember that. Get your reps in, define the activity and do it.
I love it. I love it. And I say it on the show all the time, self-leadership, lead yourself. Like, listen to Ed. He's got a lot of great things to say, but make it your own. Take that information, but what are you going to do with this information? Just knowing it is not going to change anything. So Ed, once again, thank you so much for your time and for sharing. And I hope everyone enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Until next time, keep leading yourself. We'll see you next soon.
Thank you, Bobby.